This is going to somehow, I don't know, socialize the banking industry or whatever sort of, statist critique they're going to offer.
I'm sure it'll be something about gay marriage if we let this go on long enough.
Yes.
This is maybe a crazy question, but is there any chance that Republicans stop filibustering? That they stop filibustering Wall Street reform, that they let it proceed with a majority vote? I mean, in part, it seems like they're edging toward a strategy in which they say they actually do want maybe even a bipartisan vote on this. Would that ever mean it's a 51-vote majority and not 60, or is that crazy talk?
Well, that's a really interesting question. Here's my feeling. My feeling is that what's happened is the norm in the institution has been established, that there is no distinction between the procedural vote and the vote on the legislation. And so it's no longer become the case that people, out of a general sense that an issue should be debated, will vote procedurally to end a filibuster but vote against the bill. And what that means is that everything ends up de facto needing 60 votes for both. And so I don't see that norm being undone, because I think it's one of these things where there's this kind of, institutional inertia. Now that that's been established as what everybody does, it's hard for me to see anybody walking that back.
I hear you. Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation magazine. I should mention I also just received a postcard in the mail yesterday notifying me of my new gift subscription to The Nation, courtesy of Christopher Hayes. Thank you very much for that, Chris. If it was meant as a bribe, you get anything you want for it.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
Enjoy the magazine.
Oh, I will. I always do.
Okay.
What you're looking at here is the oil rig off the coast of Louisiana that caught fire 2 nights ago, from which 11 workers are still missing. 17 workers were medevaced off the site, some of them with severe injuries. These shots were actually all taken while the rig was still afloat, although it was burning and at one point listing to the side. Since then, today, this rig has sunk, creating what federal officials say is the potential for a major oil spill. When it blew up, that rig was doing exploratory oil drilling 50 miles off the coast of Louisiana. You may recall that a decades-old moratorium on offshore drilling in other parts of the country, long considered to be too environmentally fragile to bear the risk of offshore drilling, that moratorium was just ended by President Obama. So, happy Democratic president, happy huge Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress, and happy Earth Day. President Obama's speech in New York was the big A-list headline on Wall Street reform today. But today's real legislative action was about part of the financial sector that's fought really hard to not be nationally regulated at all. And that's because what they do is something that's commonly thought of as loan sharking. They don't call themselves loan sharks, of course. They call themselves payday lenders, which makes them sound less like cartoon villains, but doesn't really change what they actually are. Here's how payday lenders market themselves.
At Check into Cash, things go your way. When you got a cash crunch or a money mayday, we cash your personal check between paydays. It's a quick hip-hop to your one-stop money shop. Check into Cash.
She loves our quick and easy payday advance services.
Between paydays, I go to my neighborhood Check into Cash.
The only original, uniquely individual, one-stop money shop, Check into Cash.
So you got a cash crunch or a money mayday, you hip-hop to your payday lender and they'll give you cash. They give you cash as they sort of advance on your next paycheck. And when your next paycheck comes in, you better hope you can pay off that loan and the fee they charged you for that loan, because if not, maybe then you'll be taking out another loan. Roll that amount you couldn't pay back, plus that fee that you couldn't pay back, plus a new fee into a new, bigger payday loan, and hope that maybe on your next payday you'll be able to pay back even more. If on your next payday you can't pay back even more, well, why not just roll it over again? Original loan amount, original fee, second fee, third fee, roll it all together. How much do you owe them now? This is how payday lenders end up raking in up to 400% interest on their loans. They make these little loans seem so simple, but just like with loan sharks, just like with the most predatory credit cards, you slip up, it rolls over, and pretty soon you are very deep underwater, as in 400% annual interest underwater. According to the most generous estimates of how payday lending works, only about 25% of payday lending customers pay off their loans on their next paycheck on time, which is exactly how these companies like it. How else are you going to get somebody up to 400% interest unless you can roll them over? Payday lending is so bad that a few years ago, the military asked the government to crack down on payday lending to our troops. and cap interest rates paid by members of the armed services, because so many military families and young soldiers were being preyed upon and financially ruined by payday lending. Congress did actually cap payday lending interest rates for troops, but us civilians, we're still swimming with the sharks. Now, this guy who came in at the very end of that commercial that we showed you, his name is Allan Jones. He's the CEO of the first nationwide payday lending chain, which is called Check Into Cash. Unlike his customers, Allan Jones is not exactly living paycheck to paycheck. According to Tennessee Business Magazine in 2005, Allan Jones was one of the 20 richest people in the great state of Tennessee, worth maybe $500 million. Here's an aerial view of what we believe is his 400-acre spread in Cleveland, Tennessee, while it was still under construction. According to Tennessee Business Magazine, his home has, quote, an air-conditioned muscle car garage highlighted by his $300,000 Maybach, an on-site greenhouse with a full-time horticulturalist, a 3-story treehouse, and a regulation-sized football field with lights, a scoreboard, and supporting fieldhouse and stands. He has a regulation-sized, fully lit football field and stands in his backyard. He once hosted the country's first private college football game. Not private as in these were private colleges, but private as in it was held in Allan's yard. Want to see Allan Jones's boat? This is the Janie, named after his wife. It's actually his second yacht. He bought this one for a reported $24 million after his first yacht burned down. And at least for a while, you could rent this yacht for $25,000 a day plus expenses. So this is the face of payday lending, and he actually wants to be. The reason that we have all this information about Allan Jones's ostentatious wealth is because he likes to show it off. Allan Jones is not hiding his $500 million light under a bushel. He's putting himself in TV commercials. He's blogging now about the poor payday lending industry and how it shouldn't be regulated when financial reform happens. His argument is that payday lenders are poor. This was his first blog post. Despite rhetoric, payday lenders earn minimum wage. He says, quote, it's a store that earns $8.96 for each hour they're open, raking it in. Believe it or not, some elitist people in the mainstream media think so. Break down the profits of the nation's largest payday lender, and it becomes clear that this industry isn't raking in heaps of money. Jones then divides monthly earnings statements from other payday lending companies by the number of stores and the number of hours they're open. He decides that the whole industry is only making minimum wage, or less. This is hardly raking in the cash. He says it's hard to feel like a predatory lender when you make about the same wage as the average employee at Burger King, a company which, by the way, netted $200 million last year. Whoppers are clearly more profitable than payday loans. So payday lending king Allan Jones may be going to have to sell the Maybach, right? Or the yacht, or the 433 acres in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or maybe get back some of those campaign donations he's given over the years to his friend and Senate Banking Committee member Bob Corker, maybe just to make ends meet. Right now, payday lenders like Allan Jones are not regulated by the federal government at all. It's left to the states. Some states have effectively banned payday lending. Some have capped interest rates that payday lenders can charge, which has effectively driven them out of business in their states. One of those states was North Carolina, home of Senator Kay Hagan, who now says she wants to do the same thing for the whole country. Senator Hagan introduced a bill today, which is called the Payday Lending Limitation Act, and it would keep creditors from lending money to borrowers who have taken out payday loans 6 times in 12 months. People caught in the trap, in other words. It would give borrowers more time to pay back their debts, and it would put the payday lending industry under federal oversight. The Community Financial Services Association of America represents payday lenders, founded naturally by Allan Jones. They told us today in response to Kay Hagan's proposed legislation, quote, "We oppose this. It limits consumer choice. We're regulated by the states like all non-bank lenders. The federal government has bigger concerns than $345 loans at 400% interest." And you know, he has a point. That is not the kind of thinking that puts Maybachs in Allan Jones's garage. Next week, the Senate takes up financial reform in earnest. So as you watch the payday lending industry marshal its forces to plead poverty, to try to stop the threat of them actually finally being regulated, just remember this face. and his private football stadium, and 400% interest to people who don't have enough money to make it to their next paycheck. So you're walking down the street in Arizona. Observe a group of people standing on the street or sitting on benches or walking around or whatever. How do you know which of those people you should reasonably suspect is in this country illegally? Good news. California Republican Congressman Brian Bilbray has thought about this. He has an idea.